Well, welcome back, Redemption Church. Pastor Daniel Davis here with Sean Nelson again, and we are here for part 2 of our questions and answers regarding sex and sexuality and pursuing wisdom. Remember, we're defining wisdom as skill in the art of godly living, and we want to get better at living for the Lord and in the light of His goodness and in the wisdom of God. And so we're diving into all these issues where we really feel the need for wisdom. And so this video is going to be more around issues of where biblical wisdom kind of conflicts headlong with cultural realities that we're facing right now. And so we had several questions come in regarding kind of how Christians should interact with just a world and a culture that rejects our views of sexuality. So Sean, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Well, the first question is right to the point. How do we interact with those who view this issue, and I'm guessing this issue being sexuality, completely differently than we do?
Yeah, it's a really important question because it's a constant reality, right? Like when we go out into the world, when our kids go to school, when we go to work, when we go to the grocery store, the odds are really, really strong that you're going to run into people who think and live differently than we believe the scriptures teach. And so how do we interact with those things? I think one of the first things that I always try to remind myself when I come across people who don't believe or live in the same way that I do is I should never be surprised, right? I'm never going to be like, oh, wow, people who don't believe in Jesus don't do what he says and don't believe what he says either. And so I want to just remember that people who aren't Christians don't live like Christians and don't think like Christians. It's a whole different way of seeing the world. The way that I see the world has been totally changed and upended by the lordship of Jesus, because he is the Word of God made flesh, who lived in my place, died on the cross, rose from the dead, and now reigns on high and sent his Spirit to live in me. Like, that changes everything about the way I see the world. And so everything about who I am and what I do should be subservient to him, should be submitted to him. And so that's why I see sex and sexuality the way that I do, is because of who Jesus is and what he has done. So my neighbors don't know Jesus in that way, and that's their biggest problem. Like, I think sometimes we can get really fixated on, I need to make sure they agree with me about sexuality, and it's like, that's not their biggest problem. Like, our neighbors need to know the love and mercy of Jesus. They need to know the worthiness of Jesus for trusting him, for living in his kingdom and for his purposes, because that's where real flourishing is. And so really, focus on convincing your neighbors of the glories and goodness of Jesus. And then everything else kind of is subject to that. Everything follows from there. But I think if we're just converting people to our views on sexuality, that doesn't actually help them in the long run.
Yeah, no, Jesus himself had something to say about making people twice the son of hell by changing their behavior, but not their worship of God.
Yeah, not their hearts. We need a heart change. We need to be brought to new life through the resurrecting power of Jesus by the Spirit. So I think focusing on that and just trying not to be scandalized by that thing. I think it's helpful to just show our neighbors the love and the grace of Jesus.
All right, well, we get a little bit more specific in the next question, and that's, how do we show both love to friends and family who are LGBTQ+, and also be faithful to God's design for gender sexuality, and faithful to, as you've said, tell the truth to people?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a really important question, because this moves it from like disagreeing about ideas to like really kind of a more personal question. Like, I have friends and family who identify as LGBT, and so how do I interact with them? And I think again, like what I said for the first question still applies, right? So like, I shouldn't be surprised, shouldn't be scandalized. I should make sure to keep the main thing the main thing. But one of the things that's true of people who are identifying in these ways is that this is really important to them. Like, it is an area of their life that they find part of their identity in. And that's not surprising, because sex is a really powerful thing. That's why we're spending all this time answering these questions. That's why the Bible spends so much time talking about sex and sexuality, is because it is a powerful gift of God. And so this moves into a really personal place. And so there needs to be a lot of compassion. There needs to be a lot of love and connection, valuing connection over like a need to constantly be correcting. Is how do I connect with the people in my life who are experiencing life in this way, like who are identifying as LGBTQIA+. I don't know. It's a lot of different ways this is expressing itself in the world.
Yes.
And so one of it is just valuing connection, but there is a place for saying the truth. Like Jesus came full of grace and truth, and so sometimes we're prone to focus on one of those, right? So I'm really gracious, but I never really speak the truth, or the truth is really important and I'm not gracious at all.
That's your Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to be full of grace and truth, as much like Jesus as we can be, where we want to tell the truth. Like this is the path of flourishing that I think God has laid out for us. But also Jesus came to save sinners, and I'm not any better than anybody, right? Like I'm just like anybody that I'm sharing the gospel with. I am a sinner, and the real challenge, I think, is helping Christians and non-Christians alike to see that the life of following Jesus is a life of self-denial. Like it is. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me, Jesus says. And so every Christian should be practicing a radical self-denial in favor of and in submission to Jesus. And so I'm being called to do that. Anybody who's same-sex attracted or any of this, we're all being called to not trust ourselves for a life of flourishing, but to trust Jesus for a life of flourishing. And so I just want to remind us that we're all called to that. We're all called to deny self and to trust Jesus for our flourishing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, our last question in this section is, how do we teach our kids about who we are and understand why people are being led astray when it comes to all these issues, sex and sexuality? So looking out at our culture, looking at our children coming up, how do we faithfully teach them the truth, but also teach them kind of what we've been talking about how to view and interact with the culture around us? Yeah.
This is really important. I've got 5 kids. Did you know? Like this is a thing that's we have to talk about, and that's the first thing I would say is like you have to talk about this. Like your kids are learning about these things.
Yeah,
like they are, because it's on the TV shows. Like even if like you're homeschooling, like your kids are seeing things. They're being told things through media. And certainly, like at school and things like that, there is no way your kids aren't being indoctrinated in some way about issues of sexuality.
Let's be honest here. Even if you cut off the internet, even if you homeschool, even if you don't let them watch TV, they're going to go outside at some point, and they're going to probably come across someone who disagrees with our view of sexuality.
Absolutely, and that's why I think the fortress mentality of parenting is not sustainable.
Yeah.
You know, in a culture like ours, if we're just trying to like keep the walls up and keep the good people in and the bad people out, you know, if that's the mentality, it's just not sustainable. I think what's really important is that we model for our kids a healthy biblical sexuality, and that they're seeing what it means to live as a man and a woman, as a husband and a wife. That the way we talk about marriage, the way we honor marriage in our homes, that some of it is helping our kids interact with what is good and true and beautiful about God's design for sex and sexuality. But also, we need to make sure they understand what's happening in the world, ways in which that is being shifted or twisted. So helping them to understand, man, the internet is full of confusing and sometimes dangerous things, and just helping our kids learn how to navigate that, and just know what to stay away from, and putting up proper safeguards for our kids to protect them from seeing things they're not ready to see. And I think we shy away from that. Sometimes because we're just uncomfortable talking about these things with our kids. Maybe our parents didn't talk to us about these things in a good way or in a healthy way, but let's not pass that on to our kids. I think really I want to encourage just a real openness with our kids, not inappropriately, but age appropriate, a real honest communication about the good, the bad, the ugly, the confusing of sex and sexuality in our world, because there is no avoiding the conversation for the kids forever. You just can't, and it would be a disservice to send our kids off to college having never coached them or trained them or discipled them around these areas, because all of this is going to matter for their whole life. And so God has given them parents to raise them up in the way that they should go, to help them become skillful in the art of godly living as well. So we want to help our kids become wise.
Well, and even just looking at it from not just a let's protect our children perspective, but from like a mission perspective. If our kids don't know the mission field, if they don't know the challenges they're going into and things like that, you talk about sending your kid off to college, if they've never thought about this issue in real terms before, then they're not prepared to witness to their friends that they're going to meet, the people they talk to that disagree. So we're doing them a service by doing this. We're not harming them. We're not bringing pain into their life that they don't need. That's the shelter mentality that we often have. But we're preparing them for a life of service to Christ.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that maybe this is a good way to end this video is Proverbs is doing exactly that. Proverbs is full of counsel, specifically about sex. I mean, Proverbs 5 and 6, there's so much in these chapters about warning against the dangers of sexuality being misused or misapplied. And then there's a call towards righteousness and a celebration of God's good design for sex and sexuality. And Proverbs reads like a father giving his son advice. So we should take our cues from this biblical pattern of passing down wisdom to our children, in really honest ways. So.
Well, guys, that's part 2 of our questions of sex. Next time, we'll be looking at the topic of politics, and hopefully that will be beneficial to you as well. Thank you for being with us, and we will see you in the next video.
Sounds good.